Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time, not into a battle or a royal court, but into the fiercely competitive, ridiculously flamboyant world of 18th century English fashion. We're going to uncover the story of the Macaronis, a group of young rebels who used silk, powder, and sauce to challenge everything society thought it knew about being a man. Honestly, with their towering wigs and skin-tight breeches, you'd be lucky to survive your first public outing without being turned into a scandalous cartoon in the morning paper. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. And as we settle in, I'd love for you to drop a comment below telling me what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't a sight, but a smell. It's the scent of home, and it's disappointing. It's a thick, damp cocktail of coal smoke, wet wool, and the faint, ever-present tang of the Thames River. For the past 2 years, your nose had grown accustomed to the perfumes of Parisian salons, the aroma of sun-baked marble in Rome, and the scent of citrus groves in Florence. This, by contrast, is the smell of duty, the smell of England. Your carriage rattles over the cobblestones of London, and the jolts feel harsher, less forgiving than the smoother roads of France. You press your face against the cool glass, peering out at a city you barely recognize, or perhaps a city you are seeing with new, critical eyes. Everything seems to be painted in shades of grey, brown, and soot. The brickwork is dark, the skies are low, oppressive blanket of cloud, and the people scurrying along the crowded pavements are wrapped in heavy, practical fabrics of navy and black. It's a city built for purpose, not for pleasure. A city of commerce and empire, not of art and leisure. This is the homecoming you'd been anticipating, the culmination of your grand tour. This was the famous rite of passage for any young man of your standing, a journey across the continent to absorb culture, refine your tastes, and return as a worldly, sophisticated gentleman, ready to take your place in society. You did your part. You saw the ruins of the Roman Forum. You stood in awe before Renaissance masterpieces, and you learned to speak French with a fluency that could charm a duchess. But something has gone wrong in the process. The tour was supposed to make you appreciate England more, to see it as the pinnacle of civilization. Instead, it has only served to highlight its drabness. You remember the light in Venice, how it seemed to dance on the water of the canals, turning the entire city into a shimmering mirage. You remember the sheer, unapologetic opulence of the court at Versailles, a fantasy of gold and glass. Pure. The grandest buildings seemed to be banks and trading houses, solid and imposing, designed to project power, not beauty. The people, too. You watch a group of men outside a coffee house. They are stout, their faces ruddy, their wigs modest and businesslike. They laugh loudly, a booming, hearty sound that seems to shake the very air. They are the picture of British masculinity, strong, confident, unpretentious, and to your eyes, fresh from the elegant, nuanced world of continental high society. They look clumsy, almost brutish. This feeling brings a prickle of guilt. These are your people, your countrymen. This is the world you were born to lead. But you can't shake the feeling of being an outsider. A brightly colored bird that has accidentally migrated to a land of crows. The silk of your waistcoat, a vibrant floral brocade you had custom made in Lyon, feels impossibly loud under your traveling cloak. The delicate lace at your cuffs, which was so admired in Paris, now seems frivolous, almost foolish, against the London gloom. Historians are still debating the precise psychological impact of the Grand Tour on these young aristocrats. Was it a genuine, transformative cultural education that opened their minds to new ideas of beauty and self-expression, or was it simply the ultimate display of privilege, An extended two-year party that left them with expensive tastes and a sense of detachment from their own homeland. The truth, as you feel it sinking into your bones, is probably a messy combination of both. You catch a glimpse of your own reflection in the carriage window, superimposed over the grey street. The high arch of your powdered hair, the subtle rouge on your cheeks, a common touch for men of class on the continent, the slightly melancholic, knowing expression you've practiced. You look like a character from a different story who has wandered onto the wrong set. A peculiar, and frankly unhopeful, bit of trivia you picked up in London before you left floats into your mind that many of London's streets at this time had no standardized numbering system. Addresses were often described in relation to a nearby tavern or landmark, making the city a confusing labyrinth. And right now, you feel just as lost, not in the city's geography, but in its culture. You know the route to your family's townhouse by heart, but you have no idea how you're going to navigate the social landscape that awaits you. The world you left behind 2 years ago now seems alien, and you, in turn, are about to become the alien in its midst. The carriage finally lurches to a halt. The door is pulled open by a footman whose expression is a perfect, unreadable mask of professional difference. You step out, and the air inside your family's London townhouse feels still and heavy, thick with the scent of beeswax and old paper. It's a clean smell, an orderly smell. It is the scent of a house where things are kept in their proper place. And there, standing at the base of the grand staircase, is your father. He is the very architect of this order. H.E.S. not a tall man, but he possesses a kind of gravitational pull, drawing all the room's attention to himself. He is dressed not in silk or velvet, but in a suit of sturdy brown wool, the cut practical, designed for movement rather than display. His own wig is modest, unpowdered, and tied back with a simple black ribbon. He looks solid, dependable, like an ancient oak tree rooted in the English soil. He doesn't rush to embrace you. Instead, he gives you a firm, appraising look, his eyes scanning you from the tip of your meticulously powdered hair to the frivolous, silver-buckled shoes on your feet. A flicker of something disapproval confusion crosses his face before it's replaced by a gruff, welcoming smile. So the prodigal returns, he says, his voice a low rumble. He claps you on the shoulder, a gesture that is meant to be affectionate but feels more like a test of your physical fortitude. Had your feet for unfolder well. Have you time to get your feet back on solid English ground? That phrase, solid English ground, is one of his favorites. For him, it's not just a metaphor. It refers to Oakwood, the family estate in the countryside, the true heart of your family's wealth and influence. London, in his view, is a necessary evil, a place for politics and business during the season. But a man's true worth, his very soul, is tied to his land. This is the man you are expected to become. Your future has been mapped out for you with the same precision as his crop rotations. You are to spend time with his estate manager, learning the nuances of tenant farming and land enclosure. You are to learn the local political landscape, with the goal of eventually standing for Parliament, representing the interests of your family and your county. You are to marry the daughter of a neighboring landowner, a sensible girl with a good dowry and wide hips, to ensure the continuation of the family line. Your life, as he envisions it, will be a cycle of manly, productive pursuits. Fox hunting in the autumn, where the thrill of the chase is matched only by the copious amounts of port consumed afterward. Long days spent riding across your property, overseeing the work. Evenings spent in the company of other landowners, discussing the price of grain, the latest parliamentary bill, and who among them could claim the title of a four-bottle man, as a badge of honor, who could drink 4 bottles of port in a single evening and still be steady on his feet. The idea strikes you as just as performative and ridiculous as the most elaborate Parisian fashion, just with a much higher risk of gout. This is the ideal of the 18th century English gentleman, a figure of staunch pragmatism. His power comes from his acres, not from his wit. His clothes are for warmth and durability, not for show. He is deeply suspicious of anything that smells of potpourri or faux pro. the terms he often uses interchangeably to describe anything French. For him, and for his entire class, this isn't just a lifestyle, it's a statement of national identity. It is everything the French aristocracy is not, where they are seen as decadent, and living on the whims of an absolute monarch. The English gentleman is independent, masculine, and master of his own domain. And this is where historians still argue, was this plain-speaking, befitting, country-loving persona a genuine, organic expression of English character, or was it a carefully constructed political and cultural brand, a form of nationalistic performance art designed specifically to create a contrast with their greatest rival, France? As you look at your father, who seems so utterly, unshakably convinced of his own authenticity, you wonder if even he knows the answer. He steers you towards his study, his hand firmly on your back. We'll have you out of those continental things, and into some proper tweed tomorrow, he says, his voice laced with an attempt at good humor that doesn't quite mask the command beneath. A few months in the country will put the color back in your cheeks. The right sort of color. You walk beside him, the soft silk of your coat whispering against the rough wool of his. You feel like a fragile, brightly painted porcelain figurine being led along by a block of granite. The entire house, with its dark wood paneling and stern-faced ancestral portraits, seems to be watching you, judging you. You've returned home, but you've never felt more like a stranger. The path laid out for you is clear, respectable, and safe, and every fiber of your being wants to run in the opposite direction. A few days later, you find yourself at a crowded social gathering, a soiree at the home of a family friend. It's your official re-entry into London society, and you feel less like a guest of honor and more like a museum exhibit. Your father has insisted you wear a slightly more subdued English-made suit, but you've rebelled in the details. The lace at your cuffs is a little too extravagant. Your wig is still a touch higher than anyone else's, and you've dared to apply a hint of rouge, a practice you saw everywhere in Paris, but which he seems to attract disapproving glances. You're trying to navigate a conversation with a portly baronet who is describing, in excruciating detail, the merits of a new type of drainage ditch. Your mind is drifting, imagining you're back in a Venetian cafe, when a voice cuts through the drone of the baronet's monologue. Well, look what the Grand Tour dragged in. Another pretty little macaroni. The voice belongs to a young man about your age, but HES the polar opposite of you. HES dressed in the sturdy, no-nonsense fashion your father champions. His cheeks are ruddy from outdoor pursuits, and his expression is a mixture of amusement and contempt. HES standing with a small group of like-minded young men, all of them looking at you as if you're a peculiar new species of insect. The word hangs in the air. Macaroni. You've never heard it used like this before. To you, macaroni is, well, it's a food. A type of pasta you developed a taste for in Naples. Often served with Parmesan cheese, it was considered an exotic delicacy. Something you write home about. How could it be an insult? You offer a cool, slightly arched eyebrow in response. A look of detached bemusement you perfected on the continent. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage. You say, your voice deliberately softer and more measured than his boisterous tone. He scoffs. Oh, I think not. We all know the type. You go off to Italy, eat a plate of their foreign noodles, and come back thinking you're God's gift to tailoring. A proper macaroni. His friends snicker. The baronet, sensing social friction, mumbles an excuse and backs away, leaving you in the spotlight. The insult isn't landing with the force they intended because you're still genuinely trying to decipher it. It's like being scolded in a foreign language. You know the intent is hostile, but the specifics are lost in translation. This is the very birth of the term as a slur. At this exact moment, in the 1762, macaroni was becoming the go-to insult for men like you. The logic, as you'll later piece together, was this: you went abroad and adopted foreign tastes that were considered absurdly refined and done English. The most identifiable of these tastes was for Italian pasta, specifically macaroni. Therefore, you were a macaroni. The name implied that you were not just fashionable, but thoroughly fashionable, which, in the fiercely nationalistic climate of 18th century Britain, was the worst kind of fashionable to be. It was a way of saying you were unpatriotic, inauthentic, and fundamentally not a real British man. Historians have a field day with the semiotics of this. They debate whether the term was initially coined by the upper classes to gently mock their own, or if it originated from the lower classes as a way to ridicule the perceived effeminacy of the aristocracy. The consensus leans toward it being an inside joke that quickly spiraled out of control, picked up by satirists and playwrights who saw its comedic potential. A fascinating, and somewhat related, little piece of trivia is that the feather and the cap of the song Yankee Doodle is a direct reference to you. When the American colonist stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni, he was trying, in his provincial way, to imitate the height of European fashion, that is, the flamboyant style of a macaroni. He was, in essence, a country bumpkin trying to look like a trendy city slicker. The song was originally sung by British troops to mock the colonial soldiers as unsophisticated posers. But in this moment, you know none of that. You only feel the sting of mockery. You are being singled out. Your very identity reduced to a punchline about pasta. You see your father across the room, watching this exchange. There's a look of profound disappointment on his face, as if your social ostracism is a direct reflection of his failure as a parent. You decide against a witty retort. Instead, you give the young man and his friends a slow, deliberate look up and down, your gaze lingering for a moment on their plain, functional boots. Then you produce a small, ornate snuff box from your waistcoat pocket. With a series of delicate, practiced gestures, you take a pinch of snuff, inhale it gracefully, and snap the box shut with an elegant click. You don't say a word. The gesture is pure performance. It's dismissive, it's theatrical, and it's utterly, unapologetically continental. You've just lost a battle of words, but you've also, in your own quiet way, declared war. If they are going to call you a macaroni, you won't run from it. You will become the most magnificent, the most outrageous, the most unapologetic macaroni they have ever seen. You will take their insult and wear it like a badge of honor, like the most expensive silk brocade. The name was meant to shame you back into conformity, but, instead, it has just given your rebellion a name. The first and most obvious battlefield in your newly declared war is your head. Specifically, what sits upon it. Your father's lectures about solid English ground have been replaced by a new obsession building your wig into a monument of defiance. You summon your hairdresser, a Frenchman named Monsieur Dubois who understands that hair is not merely hair, it is architecture. He arrives at your townhouse with an arsenal of tools that looks more suited to sculpting than to grooming combs of varying sizes. Curling irons heated over a small brazier, pots of sticky pomatum, and a large bellows-like device for puffing powder. The process is an exercise in patience and engineering. First, your own hair. What little of it is fashionable to keep is scraped back and tied. Then comes the foundation, a cage-like structure made of wire or horsehair, which will give the wig its essential shape and, more importantly, its staggering height. This is the scaffolding upon which your masterpiece will be built. Use it for what feels like hours as Monsieur Dubois works with the focus of a Michelangelo. He attaches wefts of human hair or, more commonly, horse or goat hair for the truly voluminous creations to the frame. He curls, he teasers, he builds layer upon layer, creating a towering structure that seems to defy gravity. A popular style you favor is the toupee. The high, forward swept roll of hair that sits atop your forehead like a breaking wave. Some of the most extreme Macaronis build their wigs so high they have to remove the tops of their sedan chairs or step awkwardly to get through doorways. Then comes the pomatum, a greasy, often heavily scented paste made from animal fat. Bear grease was particularly prized, which acts as a sort of glue, holding the entire precarious construction together. Monsieur Dubois slathers it on, his hands working deftly to smooth every strand into place. The scent is overwhelming. A mix of lard and whatever perfume has been added to mask it. Usually lavender or orange blossom. Finally, the powder. This is the grand finale. You are draped in a protective cape, and you hold a paper cone to your face to protect your eyes and lungs. Monsieur Dubois loads his bellows with finely milled starch, which has been scented and sometimes colored with gray, blue, or even pink pigments. With great, theatrical puffs, he blasts your wig until it is coated in a uniform, snowy white layer. The air fills with a choking cloud of powder, and you try your best not to sneeze and ruin the pristine finish. This entire affair is, of course, wildly impractical. The wigs are heavy, hooked, unditchy. They are a nightmare to sleep in, requiring a special wooden block to rest your neck on to avoid crushing the creation. They are also, it must be said, a paradise for pests. A little known, and rather unsettling, fact of the era is that these elaborate, pomade-slathered wigs often became home to head lice. Some aristocrats even had tiny, decorative louse scrapers made of silver or ivory to discreetly deal with the problem. So why endure it? Because your wig is no longer just a wig. It is a statement. Its exaggerated height is a direct middle finger to the modest, practical wigs of your father's generation. Its pristine, artificial whiteness is a rejection of the natural, ruddy-cheeked ideal of the country gentleman. It says, I have so much time and money that I can afford to spend hours and a small fortune on something so utterly useless and extravagant. Historians are still in a bit of a muddle about the precise origins of this big hair trend. Was it driven by a desire to imitate the towering hairstyles of the French court under Louis XVI and XVI, or was it a homegrown English phenomenon? An almost cartoonish exaggeration that was intended from the start to be satirical. The most likely answer is that it began as an imitation of French style and then, in the hands of the Macaronis, was pushed to such an absurd extreme that it became a parody of itself, a sort of meta commentary on the very nature of fashion. When Monsieur Dubois is finally finished, he steps back to admire his work. Monsieur, c'est magnifique. You look at your reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at you is almost unrecognizable. Your head seems to have doubled in size. The towering, powdered creation makes your face look smaller, more delicate. It is a mask, a persona made tangible. You turn your head slowly from side to side. The wig feels precarious, as if a sudden gust of wind could topple the entire structure. Your father happens to walk past your open door at that moment. He stops, stares, and for a moment you think HE's going to explode. But, instead, a look of weary resignation settles on his face. He just shakes his head slowly and walks away without a word. His silence is more satisfying than any argument. You have successfully made yourself incomprehensible to him. You have placed a literal and figurative barrier of powdered horsehair between his world and yours. You stand up, your posture instantly changing to accommodate the weight and height of the wig. You have to move more slowly, more deliberately. Your whole way of being has to adapt to this absurd, glorious thing on your head. And as you prepare to make your grand entrance into the London evening, you can't help but smile. This is just the beginning. Having sculpted your head into a work of art, the next logical step is to sheathe your body in something equally provocative. Your English-made suits, even the most fashionable ones, now feel like burlap sacks to you. They are too loose, too forgiving, too brown. You need clothes that whisper of Parisians allons and German light, not of English drizzle. You summon your tailor, a man named Mr. Finch, who has been clothing your family for generations. He is a master of the sturdy, respectable English style. His reputation builds on the impeccable cut of a wool frock coat. When you begin to describe what you want, his face, a roadmap of professional composure, begins to show signs of strain. Tighter, you insist, pointing to the sketch you've made of a French-style coat, much tighter across the chest and shoulders. Mr. Finch sucks in his breath. But, sir, That would allow for no freedom of movement. A gentleman must be able to ride, to draw his sword. I have no intention of doing either. You reply coolly. I intend to be looked at. This is the fundamental shift in philosophy. Traditional English menswear was built for action. Macaroni fashion is built for appearance. It is clothing as sculpture, not as function. You demand silks and satins in colors that make Mr. Finch visibly wince: sky blue, charcoal yellow, and a particularly vibrant shade of rose pink that you saw on a courtier at Versailles. You want striped silk stockings that cling to your calves, showcasing the shape of your leg, a key masculine feature that you will now accentuate with feminine fabrics. You commission breeches, the short trousers worn by men, so tight that getting into them will become a daily struggle, often requiring the assistance of a valet and a significant amount of powder to ease the friction. The result is a silhouette that is radically different from the English standard, where the typical gentleman's coat is broad and A-shaped, flaring out from the waist. Yours is narrow and form-fitting, cinched tightly at the waist to create an almost waspish figure. The sleeves are tight, the cuffs dripping with expensive Italian lace. The waistcoat, no longer a staid, functional garment, becomes a canvas for the most elaborate floral embroidery, a riot of color against your chest. It's a look that is deliberately, shockingly delicate. The fabrics are so fine they are easily stained or torn. The fit is so restrictive it forces you into a new posture, upright, poised, and slightly stiff. You can't slouch or sprawl in these clothes. You are forced to inhabit them with a certain grace, a physical manifestation of the refined continental manners you've adopted. This obsession with a slender, almost fragile silhouette is a direct import from the French court, and historians love to debate the why behind it. Was this aesthetic a reflection of a society so far removed from manual labor that it could afford to fetishize physical delicacy, or was it, as some social critics of the time argued, a sign of genuine physical and moral decay, a softening of the aristocratic male? The truth is likely somewhere in between. It was both a status symbol and a genuine aesthetic preference that trickled down from the top. One of the most peculiar, and frankly uncomfortable, aspects of this fashion that you embrace is the stock. This is the precursor to the cravat, a stiff piece of fabric wrapped tightly around your neck. The Macaroni style demands an exceptionally high and tight stock, which forces you to keep your chin perpetually elevated. It creates a look of haughty disdain, not because you necessarily feel it, though sometimes you do, but because your clothing physically prevents you from looking down. It's manufactured arrogance. Mr. Finch, ever the professional, delivers the finished garments. He lays them out on your bed, and the room is suddenly flooded with color. A pink silk coat, a waistcoat embroidered with green and gold blossoms, canary yellow breeches, and stockings striped in pale blue and white. It's a garden in fabric for. As your valet helps you dress, you feel a thrill of transformation. The soft, smooth silk feels alien and luxurious against your skin after a lifetime of wool. The tightness of the breeches is a constant reminder of your own body. You are not just wearing clothes, you are making a declaration. When you are fully dressed, you stand before the full-length mirror, next to the portrait of your grandfather on the wall. He is depicted in dark velvet, one hand resting on a globe, the other on the hilt of his sword. He looks powerful, serious, a man who commands fleets and builds fortunes. You, in your vibrant, skin-tight silks, look like you've come from a different planet. You look beautiful, and in 18th century England, for a man to be beautiful was a deeply suspicious and radical act. You know that when you step outside, you will be met with a mixture of awe, ridicule, and outright hostility. But as you adjust the lace at your cuff, you don't feel fear. You feel armored. Your clothes are your weapon and your shield. They are a visual manifesto, a brightly colored flag planted firmly in the drab landscape of your homeland. Mr. Finch may have sewn the seams, but you are the one weaving the narrative. Now that you are a confection of powdered hair and pastel silk, there is one final, essential accessory required to complete the Macaroni look. It is an item that, on the surface, connects you to the traditions of gentlemanly honor, but which you will subvert into a statement of pure, glorious uselessness. It is your sword. By law and by custom, a gentleman in the 18th century is expected to wear a sword in public. It is a symbol of his status, a sign that he is a free man, entitled to defend his own honor. Your father's sword, which hangs in his study, is a respectable and functional weapon. It's a small sword, the dueling weapon of the age, with a simple steel hilt, a triangular blade designed for thrusting, and a length that is practical for both walking and, if necessary, fighting. Your sword, however, will not be practical. You take a trip to a specialty sword cutler, a craftsman who deals not just in blades, but in the high fashion of hilts and sword knots. You bypass the standard steel and brass options and head straight for the most ornate, delicate, and expensive designs. You choose a hilt of gilded silver, intricately chased with floral patterns. The grip is not wrapped in wire for a firm hold, but in mother of pearl. But the true genius of the Macaroni sword lies in its size and how it's worn. You commission a blade that is noticeably shorter and thinner than a standard small sword. It is, for all intents and purposes, a miniature. Then comes the sword knot, a loop of fabric attached to the hilt that traditionally wraps around the wrist for better retention in a fight. You eschew the simple leather or ribbon knot for a gigantic, flamboyant tassel of silk threads, often in a contrasting color to your suit, that dangles almost to your knee. The result is an object of exquisite, comical absurdity. The sword is so small and the tassel so large that it looks less like a weapon and more like a child's toy or a theatrical prop. And that is precisely the point. By carrying this diminutive, over-decorated pea-shooter of a sword, you are mocking the very tradition of martial honor it represents. Your father and his generation see their swords as a symbol of their readiness to defend king and country, to fight a duel over a point of honor. Your tiny sword says, "Fighting is so terribly vulgar. I would much rather discuss the opera. And besides, if I were to actually draw this thing, I would probably chip a nail." It is a profound act of cultural subversion. You are taking the ultimate symbol of traditional masculinity and turning it into a fashion accessory, draining it of all its violent potential and infusing it with pure aestheticism. You're not just refusing to be a warrior, you're ridiculing the very idea of it. This particular detail of the Macaroni uniform fascinates social historians. They argue over whether this was a conscious political statement against the militarism of the British Empire, or simply the logical endpoint of a fashion obsessed with idness and delicacy. Was it an early form of pacifist protest, or just another way to show off how rich you were by owning a sword so obviously not meant for combat? As with most things Macaroni, it was probably a bit of both, a stylistic choice that carried a hefty, if unspoken, political charge, a lesser-known, but very Macaroni-esque accessory that sometimes accompanied the tiny sword was an equally tiny muff. Yes, a fair-lined tube for keeping your hands warm, traditionally an accessory for women. A Macaroni would carry a small one, often made of sable or ermine, dangling from a silken cord. The image of a man in a towering wig and high heels, carrying a miniature sword and a fur muff, was enough to send traditionalists into fits of apoplexy. It was gender-bending. It was class-defying by appropriating female accessories. And it was gloriously, unapologetically silly. You practice wearing your new sword. It's so light it's barely noticeable on your hip. You learn to walk in a way that makes the enormous silk tassel swish and sway rhythmically, drawing the eye. It is the final piece of your sartorial puzzle. Your towering hair distances you from the earth. Your tight, colorful clothes reshape your body into an object of art. And your tiny sword declares your complete detachment from the world of masculine violence and duty. You meet your friends, other young men who have also returned from their grand tours, with a similar aha moment of fashion rebellion at a coffee house. You all stand together, a flock of exotic birds. You compare the tassels on your sword knots, the height of your wigs, the sheer impracticality of your outfits. You are a gang, but your weapons are not knives and clubs, they are silk, lace, and ridicule. An older gentleman, a contemporary of your father's, watches you from a nearby table, his lip curled in a sneer. He looks at your group, then pointedly at his own sensible, full-size sword. You catch his eye, and instead of looking away in shame, you give him a little smile, and with a flick of your wrist, make your giant tussle dance. He turns away in disgust. The message is clear. He has his world, and you have yours, and yours is a lot more fun. So what does one actually do all day when dressed as a living art installation? Your life, now that you've fully embraced the Macaroni identity, settles into a new and highly structured rhythm. It is a routine dedicated to the rigorous avoidance of anything resembling work, duty, or strenuous physical activity. Your entire existence revolves around three core pillars: being seen, exchanging information, and elegant leisure. Your day begins obscenely late, often not until noon. While your father and his country gentleman peers have been up since dawn inspecting their fields, you are just beginning the levee, the ceremonial process of waking and dressing. This is not a private affair. It is a semi-public performance. Your bedroom becomes a miniature salon, where your closest friends, your tailor, your wig maker, and perhaps a purveyor of fine snuff are invited to gather. They lounge on chairs, offering commentary and gossip as your valet painstakingly assembles you. The 2-hour process of shaving, powdering, wig and wriggling into your skin-tight clothes becomes a social event. This is where the day's agenda is set, where the latest scandals are first whispered, and where plans for the evening are hatched. It is a ritual borrowed directly from the French aristocracy, and it establishes the first rule of Macaroni life: even the most mundane activity should be transformed into theatre. Once assembled, you might take the air with a stroll, but this is no brisk, healthy walk. You and your friends proceed at a glacial pace through one of London's fashionable public spaces, like Street, James S. Park or the Mall. Your goal is not exercise, it is to be seen. You walk with a carefully cultivated posture, chin up thanks to your stock, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of your tiny sword, the other perhaps holding a quizzing glass to better inspect the passers-by. You speak in a specific, affected manner. Your voice is softer, your vowels are drawn out, and your speech is littered with French and Italian phrases charmant, virtuoso to signal your continental sophistication. You and your friends have developed your own slang, a constantly evolving lexicon of inside jokes and coded language that further separates you from the uninitiated. This specialized way of speaking is, according to linguists who study this period, the classic marker of a subculture, a way of building group identity through shared language. The afternoon is for social cause or, more importantly, for the coffee house or your private club. Places like White's or Almac's are the nerve centers of your world. Here, over cups of coffee, tea, or the newly fashionable hot chocolate, the real business of the day takes place: gambling, gossip. You wager on anything and everything: the outcome of a horse race, the length of a politician's speech, or even, in one infamous case recorded in club betting books, whether a particular man lying motionless on the street outside is dead or merely drunk. The stakes can be ruinously high, and many a young Macaroni has gambled away his inheritance on the turn of a card. Gossip is the currency of your social circle. Who is having an affair with whom? Which lord is on the brink of financial ruin? Whose new wig is a frightful bore? This exchange of information is not just idle chatter, it is a way of maintaining and navigating a complex social hierarchy. To be in the know is to have power. A strange and little-known pastime you might indulge in is worm eating. No, not literally. This was slang for a peculiar form of antiquarianism, where Macaronis would develop a sudden, passionate, and often fleeting obsession with collecting obscure old coins, rare books, or ancient artifacts. It was another way to demonstrate refined taste and immense disposable income, hunting down worm-eaten manuscripts or Roman coins. Historians are divided on whether this was a genuine intellectual pursuit or just another form of competitive consumerism. A way to one-up your peers by owning something older and more obscure than they did. As evening falls, the day reaches its crescendo. You might attend the opera, where your primary goal is not to watch the performance on stage, but to be seen in your box, loudly critiquing the singers and socializing with your friends. Afterwards, you might proceed to a masked ball or a fete at one of London's pleasure gardens, like Vauxhall or Ranelagh. These were magical, lamplit wonderlands where different social classes could mingle in a carefully managed environment of music, food, and spectacle. You will not return home until the early hours of the morning, only to begin the entire cycle again the next day. It is a life of immense, decadent, and ultimately exhausting leisure. You produce nothing tangible. You contribute nothing to the economy or the empire in the way your father understands it. Your entire function is aesthetic and social. You are a professional connoisseur of surfaces, a living testament to a life lived purely for the sake of style, and in a society that increasingly valued utility and productivity. This was perhaps the most rebellious act of all. To live the life of a macaroni. You can't just be a macaroni, you have to go to macaroni places. Your existence is defined by a specific geography, a map of London's West End where your kind congregates, safe from the grimy, industrious world of the City of London to the eastern regimental stairs of the establishment. Your world is a triangle of exclusive postcodes. The points of this triangle are Street, James's, Mayfair, and Covent Garden. Within this gilded cage, you have your specific habitats. Your washing holes where you can display your plumage and reinforce your group identity. Prime among these are the gentlemen's clubs of Street, James's Street. Almack's is one of your key headquarters. By day, it's a place for gambling and political gossip, but by night, its assembly rooms host some of the most exclusive, and therefore most desirable, social events in London. Gaining entry is a social trial by fire. The club is presided over by a committee of terrifyingly influential aristocratic ladies. The lady patronesses, whose single word can make or break a young man's social career. To be deemed not the thing by these women is social death. You, with your flawless continental manners and impressive wardrobe, have passed their scrutiny, much to your father's grudging relief. Then there is White's, which has a reputation for even more decadent and high-stakes gambling. The club's famous betting book is a living document of aristocratic recklessness. It's here you might witness a friend wager his entire country estate on a single hand of faro, or a roll of the dice. It's a high-octane environment fueled by wit, and a terrifying disregard for financial consequence. For a slightly more intellectual, or at least pseudo-intellectual, afternoon, you might frequent a coffee house. Not just any coffee house, but one favored by the fashionable set, like the Smyrna or the British Coffee House, which was a known hub for Scotsmen in London, but also attracted a stylish, literary crowd. Here, the conversation is sharper, the gossip more literary, and you can debate the merits of a new poem or play with the same passion you would a new style of waistcoat. But the true magic happens at night. In the fantastical environments known as pleasure gardens, the two reigning queens of London nightlife are Vauxhall, south of the river, and Ranelagh in Chelsea. These are not mere parks, they are sprawling entertainment complexes, the 18th century equivalent of a theme park for adults. As you step into Vauxhall Gardens, you're entering another world. Thousands of lanterns hang from the trees, casting a soft, flattering glow on the winding paths. The air is filled with the sound of an orchestra playing in a Rococo-style bandstand. You can stroll through wooded groves, admire fountains and statues, or retreat into a private supper box with your friends to enjoy a sliver of ridiculously overpriced ham and a bottle of wine. Vauxhall is a place of delightful contradictions. It's open to anyone who can afford the 1 shilling entrance fee. So you find yourself mingling with a much wider cross-section of society than you would at Almack's. This element of social mixing is part of the thrill. You might flirt with a masked actress or brush shoulders with a wealthy merchant, all under the semi-anonymous veil of the twinkling lights. It's a space of performance, where everyone is on display. Renelog, on the other hand, offers a different kind of spectacle. Its centerpiece is the rotunda, a gigantic circular building with a central pillar housing a fireplace and the orchestra. The main activity at Ranelagh is the promenade. For hours, hundreds of elegantly dressed people walk in a slow, continuous circle around the interior of the rotunda, eyeing each other, nodding to acquaintances, and showing off their outfits. It is a human carousel of fashion, a ritualistic display of seen be seen that is almost comically absurd in its poignancies. It is, in other words, a perfect Macaroni environment. A curious microhabitat that historians are still piecing together is the role of the bagnio. Originally, bagnios were Turkish-style bathhouses, but by your time, the term had become a euphemism for a very specific type of establishment, a high-class brothel that also offered private rooms for dining and discreet liaisons, while mainstream history often glosses over this. For a certain type of wealthy young man, these establishments were a part of the nocturnal landscape, a place of forbidden, and very expensive pleasure. Whether a proper Macaroni would frequent such a place is a matter of intense debate. Did their aesthetic persona preclude such earthy pursuits? Or was it all part of the same decadent package? The answer likely varied from man to man. These places, the exclusive club, the fashionable coffee house, the magical pleasure garden, are the stages on which you perform your identity. They provide the backdrop, the lighting, and the audience. Outside of this gilded triangle, you are an oddity, a target for ridicule. But here, within these walls and under these lanterns, you are a king. This network of spaces allows the Macaroni subculture to exist, to thrive, and to feel, for a fleeting, glorious moment, like the center of the universe. As you navigate these complex social arenas, from the promenade at Ranelagh to the crowded rooms of the private ball, you must be armed with the proper viewing equipment. To merely look at people with your own eyes is far too direct, too artless. A Macaroni observes the world through a lens, a practice that adds another layer of theatricality and detachment to your persona. Your weapon of choice is the quizzing glass. It is a single lens, often set in an ornate frame of gold or tortoiseshell, attached to a long ribbon or chain that you wear around your neck. It is, essentially, a monocle on a stick. Using the quizzing glass is an art form in itself. You don't just use it to see better, you use it to make a statement. You raise it to your eye with a slow, deliberate gesture, a flick of the wrist that is both elegant and languid. You then proceed to quiz someone, to stare at them intently through the lens for an uncomfortably long time. The act of being quizzed is unnerving. The single lens of the glass creates a sense of focused, critical inspection. It turns the subject into an object, a specimen to be examined. It is an incredible power play. By quizzing someone, you are wordlessly communicating a range of possible judgments. Your waistcoat is a fascinating disaster. I find your very existence puzzling. In its most devastating form, I am looking directly at you and have decided you are not worth acknowledging. After a long, silent inspection, you might simply let the glass drop, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. You and your friends use your quizzing glasses on each other, a playful form of internal critique. My dear boy, a friend might say, raising his glass to your new silk stockings, a bold choice of stripe. Truly audacious. The lens magnifies not just the stocking, but the judgment itself. This practice of public scrutiny through a lens seems to be a uniquely English eccentricity of the period. While opera glasses were common across Europe, the confrontational, individualistic nature of the quizzing glass was a hallmark of the London beau and, by extension, the Macaroni. Historians debate its social function. Was it a tool of the elite to enforce social norms by publicly shaming those who didn't measure up, or was it a symptom of a new kind of urban anonymity, where staring at strangers became a form of entertainment? It was likely both a weapon of social control and a very stylish cure for boredom. A lesser known, and even more specific, Optical tool you might employ is the prospect glass, or small telescope, while strolling in a pleasure garden or a park. You might produce a tiny, beautifully crafted telescope to get a better look at a distant beauty or to inspect the questionable fashion choices of a group across the lawn. This was particularly useful at Vauxhall, with its long, lamplit vistas. The act of whipping out a telescope in the middle of a park to spy on your fellow citizens was the height of Macaroni audacity. It was an invasion of privacy so blatant and so stylishly executed that it circled back around to being amusing. For a more intimate setting, like the opera, you have your opera glasses. But a Macaroni's opera glasses are not simple, functional binoculars. They are exquisitely made objects, often crafted from mother-of-pearl and gilded metal, sometimes even incorporating a hidden compartment for snuff or a tiny watch. Their purpose is dual, yes, to get a closer look at the soprano, but more importantly, to sweep them across the other boxes, to see who is sitting with whom, who is wearing what, and who has nodded off during the aria. The opera is a social battlefield, and your glasses are your primary reconnaissance tool. All of these devices, the quizzing glass, the prospect glass, the ornate opera glasses, serve a single, unified purpose. They create distance. By placing a piece of polished glass between your eye and the world, you are reinforcing your status as an observer, not a participant. You are not in the messy, emotional fray of life. You are coolly, calmly, and critically assessing it from a comfortable remove. It is the physical embodiment of your detached, ironic worldview. As you stand in a crowded ballroom, the air thick with perfume and the sound of the string quartet, you raise your quizzing glass. Your eye scans the room. A slow, sweeping pan. You are not just looking. You are curating your reality, framing the world one person at a time, turning the messy business of human interaction into a series of carefully composed portraits. It's a lonely way to see the world, perhaps, but it's also powerful. You are the critic, the connoisseur, the judge, and in a world built on surfaces, the man with the best lens wins. As you stand there, quizzing glass in hand, a wave of memory sometimes washes over you, clarifying how you ended up like this. The whole outrageous performance of being a Macaroni is a direct, albeit exaggerated, reaction to your time on the continent. The Grand Tour didn't just give you a taste for pasta and a few French phrases, it fundamentally rewired your understanding of what a man could be. You close your eyes for a moment, and the drone of the London ballroom fades. Replaced by the ghost of an Italian afternoon, you are in Florence, in the Uffizi Gallery. You'd gone there initially out of a sense of duty, another stop on the prescribed cultural itinerary. But then you stood before Botticelli's Primavera. You were transfixed. The delicacy of the figures, the flowing, almost translucent fabrics, the sheer, unapologetic beauty of it all. It was a world away from the stern, beefy portraits of ancestors that hung in your family home. The art of your homeland was about power, property, and piety. This was about grace, myth, and a kind of lyrical, sensual beauty you had never been taught to value. Then there was Rome. You remember standing in the Pantheon, the light streaming through the oculus, feeling a sense of history so vast and deep that made England's own story feel small and recent. You saw the ruins of the Forum and imagined the lives of Roman senators, not as stern lawgivers, but as men who lived in a world of marble, rhetoric, and public baths, a world where civic life was also a kind of public theatre. But the most potent, most transformative experience was France, and specifically, Paris. You were presented at the court of Versailles. Stepping into the Hall of Mirrors was like stepping inside a diamond. The sheer, overwhelming opulence was dizzying. But it wasn't just the gold leaf and crystal chandeliers that captivated you, it was the people. The men of the French court were peacocks. They conversed in witty, intricate epigrams. Their movements were as choreographed as a ballet. They treated flirtation as a fine art and conversation as a competitive sport. You watched them and felt a sense of profound inadequacy, but also of revelation. These were the most powerful men in the most powerful kingdom in Europe. and they were not afraid to be beautiful. They wore makeup. They adorned themselves with diamonds. Their high heels were crimson. Masculinity here was not defined by its opposition to femininity, but by its mastery of a different set of refined, artistic skills. This is a point of constant, fascinated debate among historians how much of the Macaroni style was a direct, faithful imitation of French and Italian modes, and how much was a uniquely English interpretation or even a deliberate parody. The prevailing theory is that young men like you saw this continental model of an artistic, elegant masculinity and tried to import it into the vastly different social context of London. In France, this effete style was the establishment. In England, it was a rebellion. The same pink silk coat that was perfectly acceptable at Versailles became a radical statement on the streets of London. You also picked up specific habits. The use of snuff, for instance. In England, snuff-taking was common, but you learned the continental way a delicate, almost balletic ritual involving a specific series of taps on the box, a graceful pinch, and a refined sniff, worlds away from the hearty snorting you saw back home. It was another small performance, a secret handshake of sophistication. A truly obscure post-tour habit that some of your peers adopted was a passion for amateur archaeology, inspired by the recent discoveries at Pompeii and Herculaneum. Some young men returned to England and began digging up their own ancestral lands, hoping to find Roman villas or Celtic artifacts. More often than not, they just found old farm equipment. But it was a way of bringing the historical grandeur of Italy home, a performance of intellectualism acted out with spades and shovels. These aftershocks of the Grand Tour collectively created a deep sense of dissatisfaction with your home culture. You came back with a palate that could no longer savor plain food, ears that found English music plodding, and eyes that saw London as a world painted in monochrome. You had been taught to see beauty in a new way, but you had returned to a place that was deeply suspicious of it. So you and your friends did the only logical thing. You decided to force the issue. If London would not become Paris or Florence, then you would become a walking, talking, silk-clad embassy of those places. You would create a mobile bubble of continental refinement in the heart of the drab English capital. The Macaroni phenomenon was not just about fashion. It was about a cultural homesickness. It was the cry of a generation of young men who had seen a more colorful, more artistic, more beautiful world and were desperately trying to recreate it. Or at least its trappings, from memory. You weren't just being rebellious for the sake of it. You were trying to live out a beautiful dream in a world that insisted on being stubbornly, relentlessly awake. Your flamboyant existence does not go unnoticed. In fact, you and your friends have become the new favorite villains, or perhaps comic relief of a powerful and burgeoning industry, the popular press, specifically the print shops that sell satirical cartoons. One morning, as you're taking your carefully choreographed stroll down Pall Mall, you notice a small crowd gathered around the window of a print shop. They are laughing and pointing. As you draw closer, a knot of dread and excitement tightens in your stomach. There, in the window, is a brightly colored etching, and the central figure, rendered in grotesque caricature, is unmistakably you. The artist has seized upon your most prominent features and exaggerated them to the point of absurdity. Your wig is depicted as a teetering mountain, so tall that tiny birds are shown nesting in its powdered peaks. Your tight-fitting coat is stretched to the breaking point, its floral pattern rendered as garish weeds. Your calves, of which you are so proud, are shown as spindly chicken legs in their striped silk stockings. Your cruising glass is the size of a dinner plate, and your tiny sword is no bigger than a sewing needle. The title of the print is something like The Continental Finish or A Trip to Paris Makes a Man of Him. The joke is obvious and brutal. You are not just fashionable, you are a freak. You are not just refined, you are a joke. This is your official welcome to celebrity. The satirical print was the 18th century equivalent of a viral meme, etched on 2 copper plates, printed in the hundreds, and often hand-colored by teams of women and children. These images were cheap, accessible, and merciless. They were posted in shop windows, pasted on tavern walls, and sold to be framed in private homes. And the macaroni was their star subject. You buy a copy of the print, a strange mix of shame and pride warring within you. To be caricatured meant you were significant enough to be noticed. It was a form of validation. However painful, you and your friends begin to collect these prints, comparing your portrayals. My dear, they've given you a positively enormous nose, one might say. But they've captured the absurdity of your sword not perfectly. The most famous of these satirists, whose work you see everywhere, is Matthew Darley. He and his wife Mary produced a whole series of prints dedicated to the macaroni, effectively creating a visual dictionary of your subculture. They published prints titled The Macaroni, a real character at the late masquerade, or simply showed single, exaggerated figures with titles like The Preposterous Headdress. These prints didn't just mock your style, they helped to define and publicize it, spreading the image of the macaroni across the country to people who had never even seen one in the flesh. Historians who study this period often grapple with the chicken and egg question: did the satirists simply reflect the reality of macaroni fashion? Or did their exaggerated caricatures in turn influence the Macaronis to become even more extreme? The evidence suggests a feedback loop. As the cartoons became more outrageous, some of you took it as a challenge, pushing your styles to ever more preposterous heights, as if to say, "You think that's absurd, I'll show you absurd." A particularly weird-ish subgenre of these prints were the ones that depicted Macaronis engaged in unmanly domestic activities. For instance, a print might show a group of Macaronis gathered around a tea table, gossiping with the same fervor as a group of ladies, their pinkies delicately extended. Another might show a macaroni carefully arranging flowers in a vase. The joke was always the same: these are men performing female roles. This focus on domesticity was a clever way to undermine your masculinity without resorting to more direct and legally risky accusations. You can't escape it. You see the prints everywhere. You hear people on the street using the word macaroni as a common insult. Your flamboyant rebellion, which felt so personal and unique, has been co-opted, packaged, and sold as public entertainment. It's a deeply unsettling feeling. Your father, of course, is mortified. He sees these cartoons as a public stain on the family's honor. He confronts you, holding one of the prints in his trembling hand. "Is this what you want?" he demands. "To be the laughingstock of London, to have our name associated with this?" You look at the caricature, then back at your father's furious, anguished face, and for the first time, you articulate the core of your defiance. Perhaps even to yourself. Perhaps, you say, your voice quiet but firm, "It is better to be a memorable joke than a forgettable sermon." His face falls. He doesn't understand your language, your values, your entire worldview. The print, as crude and cruel as it is, has become a more accurate portrait of who you are than any of the staid, well-painted ancestors on your walls. You are a character in a public comedy, a role you both resent and secretly relish. And as long as you keep dressing this way, you will keep giving the satirists new material. The show, it seems, must go on. The attacks against you soon escalate beyond the print shop window. Your flamboyant style, once a mere source of social comedy, is now being framed as a national threat. The people writing pamphlets and newspaper editorials, the political commentators of your day, have started to connect your powdered wig and silk breeches to a much larger, more frightening idea: the decline of the British Empire. You pick up a copy of a popular London newspaper, tucked between reports on colonial trade and parliamentary debates, as a scathing opinion piece. The author doesn't just call you silly or extravagant, he calls you dangerous. He argues that the macaroni contagion is a symptom of a deeper sickness in the nation's soul. The argument, as you read it, is both terrifying and, in its own way, flattering in its high-stakes assessment of your influence. It goes something like this: the strength of Britain lies in its unique brand of rugged, practical, masculine character. It is the hardy sailor, the pragmatic merchant, and the sturdy country squire who have built this great empire. This national character is Britain's greatest weapon. You, the Macaroni, are presented as the antithesis of this ideal. Your love for foreign fashion is cast as a betrayal of English industry. Your soft hands have never known a day of honest labor. Your delicate, refined manners are a rejection of the hearty, straightforward nature that made Britain great. The editorial paints a grim picture while the nation's enemies, like France and Spain, are building fleets and training armies. Britain's young elite, its future leaders, are busy learning how to feint gracefully and choose the correct shade of ribbon. The implication is clear: you are weakening the nation from within. You are a fifth column of Flamboyant, softening the backbone of the empire one silk waistcoat at a time. Beowulf asks, how can a man who spends 3 hours dressing his hair be expected to lead a cavalry charge? How can a nation whose sons aspire to be pretty be expected to rule the waves? This line of attack is particularly potent because it taps into a deep-seated national anxiety. Britain in the mid to late 18th century is a nation defined by its rivalry with France. This isn't just a military and economic competition, it's a cultural one. Frenchness is associated with decadence, luxury, Catholicism, and absolute monarchy. Britishness is constructed as its opposite: Protestant, free, commercial, and masculine. By adopting French styles and manners, you are accused of importing the very decadence that is seen as the cause of France's moral and political weakness. You are, in essence, committing a form of cultural treason. Historians who specialize in gender and empire find this moment fascinating. They argue that this is a classic example of how anxieties about national power are often displaced onto the bodies of deviant individuals. It's easier to blame a group of flamboyant young men for the nation's perceived problems than to confront complex geopolitical or economic issues. The Macaroni becomes a convenient scapegoat for a whole range of societal fears. A particularly strange and specific accusation leveled against you and your friends is that you are ruining the English language. Critics in magazines complain about your Macaroni dialect, a mix of English, French, and Italian, delivered with a lisping. They publish satirical Macaroni lexicons to mock your use of words like cozzo from the Italian cosi cosi, meaning so-so, or bar Macaroni slang term for a dull person or situation, which you actually helped popularize. The fear was that your linguistic affectations would corrupt the manly, plain-spoken purity of the English tongue. You discuss these articles with your friends at your club. There's a nervous energy in the room. It was one thing to be the butt of a joke in a cartoon. It's quite another to be labeled a threat to national security. Some of the more timid members of your circle start to tone down their dress, their wigs becoming slightly less towering, their colors a shade more subdued. But for you, and for the hardcore members of the Macaroni set, this political criticism only strengthens your resolve. It raises the stakes of your rebellion. You are no longer just fighting against your father's boring taste in clothes. You are now fighting against the very definition of what it means to be a patriotic Englishman. Your fashion is no longer just personal expression, it is a political statement. That evening, you deliberately choose your most outrageously pink silk coat, your highest wig, and your most useless-looking sword to attend the opera. You walk into your box with a newfound sense of purpose. Every eye in the theater is on you. They are not just looking at a fashionable young man anymore. They are looking at a symbol. To some, you are a symbol of everything that is wrong with the country. But to yourself, and to the small band of rebels who share your vision, you are a symbol of freedom, the freedom to define your own identity. Even if a whole empire tells you you're doing it wrong, the political has become personal, and the personal, you realize, has become profoundly political. Beyond the visual assault of your clothes and the political implications of your existence, you wage war on yet another front, the olfactory. You don't just want to be seen and heard, you want to be smelled. Your arrival in any room is preceded by a fragrant cloud, a deliberate and provocative sense signal that you are not like the others. The standard of masculine hygiene and grooming in your father's generation is, to your refined continental nose, rather grim. It's a world of harsh lice, oats and the faint, honest smells of horse. leather, and pipe tobacco. Perfume is regarded with deep suspicion, seen as a decadent, foreign, and vaguely effeminate affectation, something for women or for the Frenchmen you're supposed to despise. You, however, have learned on your grand tour that scent is an essential part of the gentleman's arsenal. You brought back not just new clothes, but a new philosophy of personal fragrance. Your scent profile is complex and layered. It begins with your wig. The pomatum used to sculpt it is heavily scented with things like lavender, orange blossom, or orris root. The powder that coats it is also perfumed, adding another layer of fragrance. This creates a constant, tawdry floral aura around your head. Then there is your body. You eschew the coarse soaps of England for finer, milled soaps from France or Italy, scented with bergamot or rose. After bathing, you might apply a perfumed water, a cologne, to your skin. The most famous of these, Rebellious Miracle Water, is a citrus and herb concoction from Cologne, Germany, which is just beginning to gain popularity as a refreshing, unisex scent. But the real power move is the application of parfum. You use rich, oil-based scents, dabbing them onto your pulse points and, most strategically, onto your handkerchief. The most fashionable scents are not light and fleeting, they are powerful and animal. I see musk, a secretion from the musk deer, and civet, from the civet cat, are prized for their potent, long-lasting, and frankly, rather raunchy smells. These are blended with florals like jasmine and rose to create complex, intoxicating fragrances that announce your presence long before you are seen. Waving your scented handkerchief becomes a piece of personal theater. You use it to gesture, to blot your brow or pretend to, or simply to release a fresh wave of perfume into the air around you. It's an invisible empire of scent that you create around yourself. This overt use of perfume by a man is, in London, a ridicule. It is another way you blur the lines between masculine and feminine. It aligns you with the world of the boudoir, of artifice and luxury, and distances you from the natural, earthy smells of the English countryside. The historical debate around 18th century perfume is fascinately fraught. Some historians argue that the heavy use of perfume was primarily a way to mask body odor in an age where full-body bathing was infrequent. They contend it was more about hygiene or the lack thereof than aesthetics. However, another school of thought, supported by the writings of the period, insists that for the elite, perfume was a sophisticated art form, a way to express mood, status, and personality. For the Macaroni, it was clearly the latter. Your choice of a particular musk rose blend was as deliberate and meaningful as your choice of a pink silk coat. One of the strangest and most specific scent-related practices you might adopt is the use of a pound stee box. This was a small, ornate box with a perforated lid, containing a piece of sponge or cotton soaked in perfume, or sometimes a solid block of wax and aromatic gum called a pomander. You could carry this in your pocket and take a discreet sniff whenever you needed to be revived from the foul stenches of the London streets, or, more performatively, whenever a bore cornered you in conversation. Feigning a dizzy spell and elegantly sniffing your pound stee box was a perfect way to escape a dull encounter. Your father, naturally, detests your fragrant presence. Good God! Boy, you smell like a French starts dressing room. He might grumble, waving a hand in front of his face as you enter the study. To him, the smell of your perfume is the smell of corruption, the smell of foreign influence. It is an olfactory insult to his plain and simple sensibilities. You, of course, take his reaction as a sign of success. Your perfume is a weapon in your sensory arsenal. It colonizes the air, forcing everyone in your vicinity to acknowledge your presence on your terms. It is an invisible cloak of identity. In the visual chaos of a crowded ballroom, your friend might not see you, but he will recognize your signature scent. It's a form of branding, a fragrant signature that says, I am here, I am different, and you will not be able to forget me. Your hands, which are so conspicuously free from the calluses of labor, become another stage for performance. And one of your most surprising undefective props is the fan. Yes, the fan, an object almost exclusively associated with women in English society. By adopting it, you are not just borrowing an accessory, you are hijacking a secret language. In the highly ritualized and often restrictive world of 18th century high society, the fan was a woman's primary tool of silent communication. An entire vocabulary of gestures existed, allowing a lady to signal everything from "I am interested in you" to "go away. You bore me" across a crowded room, all with a series of subtle flicks, folds, and flutters. Your decision to carry a fan is, therefore, deeply provocative. It's a deliberate appropriation of a feminine symbol and its coded language. You don't carry the large, ornate fans favored by ladies. Of course, a Macaronis fan is typically smaller, more discreet, but still exquisitely made from materials like painted vellum or silk, with sticks of ivory or mother of pearl. You and your fellow Macaronis adapt this language for your own purposes. You use it to exchange witty, silent commentary during a dull sermon at church or a tedious opera performance. A quick flutter of your fan towards a particularly garish dress across the room, followed by a shared, knowing glance with your friend, is enough to convey a volume or sarcastic critique. It becomes a tool for your clique, a way to communicate above the heads of the uninitiated. The gesture is inherently theatrical. The flick of an opening fan can add punctuation to a witty remark. The slow, languid movement of fanning yourself can convey a sense of bored superiority. It's another layer of performance, another way to control the social space around you with grace and artifice. The precise origin and codification of this fan language is a subject of great debate among historians. Some argue that it was a highly structured and widely understood system, with manuals and treatises published on the subject. Others contend it was much more fluid and informal, a collection of localized gestures and inside jokes rather than a universal language. The most likely truth is that a few core gestures were widely known, while more complex conversations were only possible between people who were already in on the same set of secrets, much like the way you and your friends use it. This appropriation of the fan wasn't the only way you played with gendered accessories. A lesser known, but equally telling, Macaroni affectation was the etui. This was a small, decorative case, often made of precious metal or enamel, designed to hold tiny personal implements like toothpicks. Earwax spoons, a horrifying but true accessory of the time, or tweezers. Like the fan, the etui was primarily considered a woman's accessory, part of the clutter of her chatelaine or belt hook. For a man to produce a delicate, enameled etui from his waistcoat pocket to, for example, retrieve a toothpick after a meal, was another subtle but clear signal. It was a gesture that said, "My personal grooming is as intricate and important as a lady's." Of course, your use of the fan is a red flag to the moral guardians of society. Satirical prints delight in depicting you fanning yourself with a limp wrist, often surrounded by adoring women who are either charmed or amused by your gender-bending antics. It is presented as the ultimate proof of your effeminacy, the final nail in the coffin of your masculinity. You are at a particularly stuffy card party. The air is thick, and the conversation is mind-numbingly dull, focused on land deeds and crop prices. You are seated across from your father, who has been glowering at you all evening, feeling a wave of rebellious boredom. You slowly draw your fan from your coat pocket. You open it with a soft snap. The conversation at the table falters. All eyes turn to you. Your father's face, already ruddy from port, deepens to a dangerous shade of crimson. He sees the fan not as an accessory, but as an insult. It is a deliberate, calculated gesture of disrespect to him and everything he represents. You meet his gaze, your expression one of perfect, placid innocence. You slowly, gracefully, fan yourself, creating a gentle breeze that carries the scent of your perfume across the table. You have said nothing, but you have dominated the room. You have used a woman's tool to assert a new kind of masculine power, the power to disrupt, to provoke, and to fascinate, all without raising your voice. The fan in your hand is a small, quiet, but deeply revolutionary weapon. Let's talk about what's on your feet. While your wig reaches for the heavens, your shoes are engaged in their own quiet, radical rebellion. You have rediscovered and enthusiastically embraced an article of footwear that had, for English gentlemen, become deeply unfashionable and symbolic of foreign decadence, the high heel. For most of the 17th century, high heels were worn by elite men across Europe. They originated in Persia as riding shoes. The heel helped grip the stirrup and were adopted by European aristocrats as a symbol of status and masculinity. But by your time, in the latter half of the 18th century, English menswear had undergone a great male renunciation, a term coined by historian John Flugel. Men had abandoned bright colors, extravagant fabrics, and high heels in favor of the dark, sober, practical suits that your father champions. The heel had been almost completely relegated to the female wardrobe. Almost. You, having seen them still sported by aristocrats at certain continental courts, decide to bring them back with a vengeance. But you don't just wear any heel. A macaroni heel is a specific work of art. It is a Lewis heel, named after Lewis XIV, curving gracefully inward from the back of the shoe before flaring out at the bottom. It is not a thick, clunky heel. It is elegant, shapely, and unapologetically high, sometimes adding 2 or 3 inches to your stature. And, in the most audacious move of all, your heels are often red. Red heels were the ultimate status symbol at the French court. An edict by Louis XIV in the 1672 restricted them to members of his nobility. The color, expensive to produce and impractical for walking anywhere but on clean palace floors. Scream, I am a courtier. I do not walk in the mud. I am close to the king. By painting the heels of your shoes red, you are making a direct, and to many English eyes, deeply unpatriotic, reference to the French court and its absolute monarchy. It's a sartorial act of allegiance to a foreign aesthetic. Wearing these shoes fundamentally changes the way you move. They pitch your body forward, forcing a new posture. Your walk is no longer the solid, grounded stride of a country gentleman. It becomes a more delicate, precise, and slightly unstable gait. It requires balance and control. It turns walking, once again, into a performance. Navigating the uneven cobblestones of London in high-heeled shoes a skill in itself, one that instantly marks you as someone who prioritizes style over practicality. The historical significance of the man's high heel is a source of endless fascination for fashion theorists and historians. Was the renunciation of the heel by mainstream English masculinity a sign of a new, more democratic or business-like ideal, or was it a conscious effort to visually distinguish men from women in an era that was becoming increasingly rigid in its gender roles? The evidence points strongly to the latter. By reclaiming the heel, you are deliberately muddying those waters, reintroducing a flamboyant, aristocratic, and gender-ambiguous element into the masculine silhouette. To complement your heels, you might also adorn your shoes with enormous, glittering buckles. Well, buckles were coming, and Macaroni's buckles are ostentatiously large, often made of silver and set with paste jewels that sparkle with every step. Some satirical prints depicted Macaronis with buckles so large they covered half their feet. This was another way to take a standard accessory and push it to a point of pure, glorious excess. You can picture the scene. You are entering a room. The first thing people might notice is the towering height of your wig. The last thing they will notice, as you walk away, is the flash of red on your heels. It's a final, parting shot of defiance. Your father, a man who lives in sturdy, fat-soled leather riding boots, finds your footwear incomprehensible. A man's feet should be on the ground, he grumbles, using his favorite solid ground metaphor yet again. He sees your shoes as proof that you are unstable, ungrounded, and teetering on the edge of ruin, both literally and figuratively. You, however, understand the power of your heels. They give you height, They give you a distinctive posture. They connect you to a lineage of aristocratic splendor that predates the boring, practical world your father inhabits. They are uncomfortable, they are impractical, and they are, in the context of 18th century London, a profoundly radical statement. Every click of your red heels on the floorboards is an assertion of your right to be extravagant, to be beautiful, and to be, in every sense of the word, elevated. Your rebellion is not just a matter of adding new, flamboyant things to your life, it's also about conspicuously rejecting the old, established pastimes of your class. You are staging a quiet, but firm, coup against your father's entire way of life, systematically replacing his beloved hobbies with your own, far more refined pursuits. The cornerstone of your father's world is the hunt, specifically, fox hunting. To him, it is the perfect fusion of sport, social ritual, and communion with his land. It involves waking at an ungodly hour, pulling on rugged boots and a thick coat, and spending the day on horseback, galloping across muddy fields in pursuit of a small mammal. The day culminates in a boisterous, drunken dinner with fellow hunters, where the conversation is loud, the jokes are earthy, and the port flows like water. You find the entire spectacle barbaric. The noise, the mud, the sheer physical exertion, it's all anathema to your carefully constructed persona. The one time you were forced to participate, you were more concerned about mud spattering your breeches than about the location of the fox. So you refuse to go. When the invitation comes to join the hunt, you plead a migraine, or a previous engagement, or simply fail to wake up in time. Instead of spending your morning in a muddy field, you spend it at your levee, perfecting your appearance. Instead of a raucous post-hunt dinner, you opt for a quiet evening at the opera. Oh, the opera. This becomes your chosen battleground. In London, Italian opera is the height of fashionable and controversial entertainment to its devotees. It is the most sublime art form, a fusion of divine music and high drama. To its detractors, including your father and most of his generation, it is an absurd and fun extravagance. They complain that the plots are nonsensical, the music is overly ornate, and, most offensively, the lead male roles are often sung by castrati men who work as treated as boys to preserve their high-singing voices. To a man like your father, the idea of celebrating these surgically altered, unmanned singers as heroes is the ultimate sign of cultural decay. For you, this is precisely the appeal. Your love for the opera is a deliberate embrace of everything the traditional English gentleman despises: artifice, emotion, and foreign languages. You become a connoisseur. You learn the names of the famous singers like Farinelli and Senesino. You can debate the merits of a particular aria or the quality of a soprano's coloratura. Your box at the King's Theatre becomes your salon, a place to see and be seen, to gossip between acts, and to demonstrate your superior taste. The historical debate here centers on whether the English aristocracy's passion for Italian opera was a genuine appreciation of the art, form or primarily another form of conspicuous consumption and social one-upmanship. Was it about the music? Or was it about having the most fashionable box and being able to drop the name of the latest star singer for the Macaroni? It was, as always, a seamless blend of both. You might genuinely be moved by a beautiful melody, but you are also acutely aware that your very presence at the opera is a performance of elite status. Another of your father's pastimes you reject is heavy drinking, specifically of port and ale. The four-bottle man ideal holds no charm for you. You replace it with the delicate sipping of fine French wines, claret from Bordeaux, or perhaps even the newly fashionable bubbly champagne or the exotic novelty of tea and hot chocolate. This shift from hearty English ale to refined continental beverages is another subtle rejection of the John Bull persona. A very niche hobby you might pick up in place of, say, breeding hounds, is something like shell collecting, or conchology. You might spend an afternoon meticulously arranging a cabinet of exotic shells sorts from the West Indies, prizing them for their delicate patterns and iridescent colors. It's a quiet, contemplative, and deeply aesthetic pursuit, the polar opposite of a loud, boisterous fox hunt. It's a hobby that requires sensitivity and an eye for beauty, not aggression and a loud voice. By making these choices, you are redrawing the map of aristocratic leisure. You are swapping the field for the salon, the stable for the stage, the tavern for the tea table. Each choice is a small act of rebellion, a quiet chipping away at the granite edifice of traditional masculinity. Your father watches this transformation with a mixture of confusion and despair. He offers to take you shooting, you counter with an invitation to a poetry reading. He suggests a tour of the stables to see a new stallion, you counter by showing him a new piece of sheet music you've acquired. You are speaking to different languages of pleasure, of what it means to live a good and fulfilling life. He cannot understand why you would choose the effeminate warbling of an Italian singer over the manly sound of the hunting horn, and you cannot understand why anyone would choose mud and blood over beauty and art. You have seceded from his world, not through a dramatic declaration, but through 1,000 small, impeccably tasteful choices. You are a walking masterpiece of silk, powder, and provocation. You have curated every aspect of your public self, from the scent you wear to the curve of your shoe's heel. But this raises the most profound and unsettling question of all, a question that perhaps even you are afraid to answer: is any of this real? Are you genuinely this person, this delicate, witty, art-loving creature who shudders at the thought of a fox hunt? Or are you playing a role as the Macaroni, a carefully constructed character, a theatrical mask that you put on every morning with your wig and take off at night? This is the central, nagging ambiguity of your existence. You watch yourself in the mirror as you go through the morning levee. You see the gestures, the affected yawns, the languid way you extend a hand to your valet. Sometimes it feels utterly natural, the authentic expression of your soul. At other times, you feel a flicker of detachment, a sense of being an actor in your own life, watching yourself perform a part you have written. Your friends, the other Macaronis, seem to exist on a spectrum. There are those, like you, who seem to have been fundamentally changed by their experiences abroad. For them, the Macaroni style is an external manifestation of an internal shift. They genuinely prefer the opera to the racetrack, a witty epigram to a dirty joke. But there are others for whom it seems to be more of a temporary, fashionable rebellion. You see them, the weekend Macaronis, who might dress the part for a London season but will eventually succumb to parental pressure. They will marry the sensible heiress, retreat to their country estates, and swap their silk coats for sensible tweed. For them, being a Macaroni was a phase, a youthful folly before settling into the serious business of being a landowner. You secretly despise them a little for their lack of commitment. Then there's the performance aspect that permeates everything. When you use your quizzing glass, are you doing it because you are genuinely curious, or because it is the correct gesture for a man of your standing to make at that moment when you litter your speech with French phrases? Is it because those are the words that truly capture your meaning, or because you are consciously signaling your sophistication? This is a question that has endlessly fascinated historians and literary scholars of the 18th century. Was the Macaroni a genuine identity, a precursor to modern subcultures where people's inner selves are reflected in their outward style, or was it more akin to a form of social satire, a performance art piece where the participants were knowingly playing an exaggerated role to comment on the follies of fashion and society? The term theatricality is often used to describe 18th century life in general, and the Macaroni is its most extreme example. The line between the authentic self and the performed self was incredibly blurry. A peculiar piece of supporting evidence for the performance theory is the existence of Macaroni dolls. These were fashion dolls, primarily for adults, dressed in the most extreme Macaroni styles. They were sold in toy shops and used to display the latest, most outrageous trends coming from London. The very idea that your identity could be replicated and sold as a miniature toy reinforces the sense that it is a role, a costume that can be put on and taken off. You might even own one, a tiny, silent caricature of yourself sitting on your mantelpiece. The emotional toll of this ambiguity can be heavy. In your quiet moments, late at night after the ball, when the powder is brushed out of your wig and the tight breeches are finally off, you are left alone with your thoughts. The constant performance is exhausting. The need to be always on, always witty, always perfectly attired, can feel like a prison of your own making. You sometimes long for the simplicity of your father's world, where a man's worth is measured in acres and bushels, not in the cleverness of his retort or the height of his wig. There is an honesty to his world, a lack of artifice, that you can't help but occasionally envy. But then you remember the stifling boredom of that world, its intellectual vacuity, its subtle lack of beauty, and you know you can never go back. You have chosen this path. You have created this person, this Macaroni. Whether he is the real you or not has almost become irrelevant. He is the you that you present to the world, and in a world as obsessed with surfaces as 18th century London, the presentation is everything. You are both the artist and the canvas, the playwright and the lead actor. It is a dizzying, confusing, and deeply modern predicament. You are caught in a paradox. The most authentic thing about you might be your commitment to your own artifice. Let's talk about the fuel that powers this magnificent Rococo engine of rebellion: money. An obscene amount of it. Maintaining the lifestyle of a Macaroni is not just a full-time job, it is a fantastically expensive enterprise. And the casual, effortless AU project is built upon a foundation of staggering expenditure. Your father's wealth is solid, tangible, rooted in the land. It comes from agricultural rents, from the sale of timber and grain. It is, for the most part, a stable and predictable income. Your financial life, by contrast, is a whirlwind of frantic spending, a constant, hemorrhaging outflow of cash that would give a sober merchant a heart attack. Let's break down the budget. First, the wardrobe, a single Macaroni suit, made of imported silk or velvet and adorned with elaborate embroidery and expensive lace, could cost more than a skilled craftsman earned in a year, and you don't just own one. You need a different outfit for every conceivable social occasion: a morning suit for your levee, a sturdier but still stylish suit for strolling in the park, and a dazzling, high-fashion creation for evening balls and assemblies. Your tailor's bills are astronomical. Then, the wig. A high-quality, custom-made wig is a significant investment, but the real cost is in the maintenance. The constant supply of pomade, the fine-milled, scented powder. These are not one-time purchases. Your hairdresser, Monsieur Dubois, is on a handsome retainer, essentially serving as your personal hair architect. Add to this the accessories: the silver-hilted sword, the gilded quizzing glass, the mother-of-pearl snuff box, the collection of jeweled shoe buckles. Each item is a statement of wealth, a tiny but potent symbol of your ability to spend lavishly on non-essentials. But the cost of your appearance is just the beginning. Your social life is a financial black hole. Membership fees for exclusive clubs like our Max and White's are steep. Then there is the gambling. This is the great, unspoken crisis of the Macaroni lifestyle. You might lose 100 guineas of fortune on a single hand of faro. The pressure to participate, to show that you can afford to lose with casual indifference, is immense. Many of your friends are one bad night at the card table away from total ruin. Your daily expenses are equally inflated. You maintain private lodgings in London, staffed with servants, including a personal valet who is an expert in the complex art of dressing you. Transportation is by sedan chair or private carriage. Dining involves expensive French wines and overpriced delicacies at fashionable taverns. A ticket for a box at the opera is a luxury few can afford. So where does all this money come from for most of you? It comes from an allowance from your father. A quarterly or annual sum that is meant to support you as a gentleman. But your spending far outstrips this regular income. This leads you into the murky world of 18th century credit. You live on debt. You have running tabs with your tailor, your wig maker, your wine merchant. The real danger, however, lies with the moneylenders. These men, often operating in legal grey areas, will advance you cash against your future inheritance at exorbitant interest rates. You are essentially selling off pieces of your future to finance your present. It's a devil's bargain. And many a young aristocrat ended his macaroni phase not with a whimper, but with the terrifying bang of his debts being called in. Historians who study the economics of the aristocracy are fascinated by this culture of debt. Was it simply a case of irresponsible young men living beyond their means, or was there a more complex social logic at play? Some argue that being in debt was, paradoxically, a status symbol. It showed that you had enough credit, enough social standing and future prospects that people were willing to lend you vast sums of money. A man with no debts was a man with no credit. However, this was a dangerous game of appearances, a financial house of cards that could collapse at any moment. A little known but common financial instrument of the time you might have used was the post-obit bond. This was a loan you took out that only had to be repaid upon the death of your father, or another relative from whom you stood to inherit. It was a grim and ghoulish way to fund your lifestyle, literally betting on your own father's demise. The constant, low-level hum of financial anxiety is the secret soundtrack to your life, while you are languidly fanning yourself at the opera. A part of your brain is calculating how you're going to pay your gambling debts, while you are commissioning a new pink silk coat. You are also dreading the arrival of a letter from a furious creditor. This extravagant spending is the unspoken engine of your rebellion. It is a rebellion against the sober, capital accumulating ethos of your father's generation. He saves, you spend, he invests, you splurge. He thinks in terms of legacy and inheritance, you think in terms of the next ball, the next suit, the next hand of cards. Your lifestyle is not just aesthetically radical, it is economically suicidal. And that, in its own terrifying way, is the most radical thing about it. Your style, so carefully curated, so outrageously expensive, and so specific to your small, elite circle, was never meant to last. But then, something strange and unexpected begins to happen. It starts to spread. The Macaroni aesthetic, which was born in protest against the mainstream, is slowly, and often clumsily, being absorbed by it. The first sign is the emergence of the imitators. You start to see them on the streets, in the parks, and even at the theatre. They are young men from the merchant class, or perhaps clerks and apprentices with aspirations above their station. They try to capture your look, but they get the details wrong. Their wigs are high, but made of cheap, coarse hair and powdered with simple flour, not fine, scented starch. Their silk coats are a shade too bright, the fabric a little too shiny, betraying a cheaper weave. Their breeches are tight, yes, but they lack the perfect, glove-like fit that only a master tailor and a massive budget can achieve. They are the six-penny Macaronis, the budget version of you. They have copied the form but missed the essence. They mimic your languid posture, but it looks awkward rather than elegant. They pepper their speech with French phrases they picked up from plays, often mispronouncing them. You and your friends are both amused and horrified by these followers. On the one hand, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Their existence proves your influence. You have become trendsetters. On the other hand, their clumsy copies devalue the brand. They make the whole style look cheap and ridiculous, rather than exclusive and subversive. You start calling the Macaroni man Q's failed Macaronis. This process of a subculture style being adopted and diluted by the mainstream is a phenomenon that social historians and cultural theorists have observed throughout history. From the punks of the 1970s to the hipsters of the 21st century, the Macaroni is perhaps one of the earliest and clearest examples of this cycle. A style begins as a radical statement by a small group. It gets noticed and satirized, and then it is adopted by a wider audience, which in turn strips it of its original meaning and rebellious power. The debate among historians is about the speed and reach of this process in the 18th century, without modern mass media. How did these trends spread? The primary vectors were the satirical prints, A young man in a provincial town like your Corbath might never have seen a real London macaroni, but he would have seen the caricatures. He might then try to recreate the look based on that exaggerated, cartoonish image, leading to even more bizarre conceived outfits. A very specific and bizarre manifestation of this trend was the female macaroni. Some fashionable women began to adopt aspects of the macaroni style, most notably the towering hairstyles. Ladies' hair, often augmented with pads and false hair, began to rival and even surpass the height of macaroni wigs. They would create enormous, elaborate coiffures, sometimes decorated with feathers, ribbons, and even models of ships or carriages. This was a strange feedback loop where a male subculture that borrowed from feminine aesthetics in turn inspired a new, even more extreme feminine aesthetic. This popularization is the beginning of the end for you. The moment your style becomes achievable, or at least imitable, by the masses, it loses its power as a mark of elite distinction. If a merchant's son can sport a high wig and a colorful coat, then what's the point? Your rebellion was predicated on its exclusivity. You find yourself in a constant battle to stay ahead of the trend. As soon as the imitators start wearing striped stockings, you move on to a new, more obscure pattern. As their wigs get higher, yours must become even more architecturally complex, perhaps with the addition of one or two strategically placed, oversized curls by the ears, known as cadoganes. It's an exhausting fashion arms race. You are in Ranelagh Gardens, doing the circular promenade in the rotunda. You see, across the way, a young man who is a perfect example of Macaroni Memque. He has all the elements, but they don't go here. His coat is too tight in the shoulders, his wig leans slightly to one side, and his attempts at a graceful, continental bow are clumsy. He looks at you with an expression of pure admiration and envy. And in his eyes, you see a reflection of your own obsolescence. The style you helped create is no longer yours. It belongs to the print shops, to the fashion dolls, to the provincial imitators. It has become a caricature of itself. The macaroni, once a sharp and witty statement, is becoming a blunt and overused cliché. It's time for something new. But what the very success of your rebellion has doomed it to extinction. In the midst of this swirling world of high fashion, high-stakes gambling, and creeping imitation, you cross paths with a man who embodies the macaroni paradox perhaps better than anyone else. His name is Charles James Fox. You see him at his usual haunt, the faro tables at White's Club. He is a force of nature. He is not slender or delicate like many of your friends. He is stocky, with a swarthy complexion and famously bushy black eyebrows. Yet, he is, without a doubt, one of you, and his youth. He is the archetypal macaroni. His wigs are extravagant. His French cut coats are made of the most expensive velvets, and his waistcoats are dazzlingly embroidered. He is a devotee of the high-stakes life, known for his ruinous gambling habits and his brilliant, witty conversation. He is also the son of one of the wealthiest and most powerful politicians in the country, Lord Holland. He is destined for a great political career, and everyone knows it. This is what makes him so fascinating. He is not just a fop or a dilettante, he is a genius masquerading as a dandy. You watch him at the card table. He loses a fortune, a sum that would make you physically ill, with a nonchalant shrug and a witty remark. He seems to embody that reckless, aristocratic disregard for money that is so central to the macaroni ethos. He once stayed up gambling for 22 hours straight, losing thousands of pounds, only to go directly to Parliament to deliver a brilliant speech on the East India Company. His presence in your circle complicates the narrative that macaronis are merely frivolous, unpatriotic layabouts. Fox is living proof that a man can be obsessed with the cut of his waistcoat and be a formidable intellectual and political operator. He demonstrates that the macaroni style is not necessarily a rejection of substance, but perhaps a different, more theatrical way of packaging it. This is a point that continues to fuel historical debate. Was the macaroni phenomenon a genuine political and cultural movement? Or was it largely as the case of Fox might suggest. A youthful phase for a generation of privileged young men before they assumed the mantle of power. Fox's career is often used as evidence for the youthful phase argument. He was a notorious macaroni in his 20s. But as his political career matured, his dress became more sober and conventional. He swapped his pastel silks for the simple blue coat and buff waistcoat that would become the uniform of his political party, the Whigs. However, others argue that his macaroni past permanently shaped his political identity. His flamboyant style, his association with the high-living, gambling aristocracy, and his perceived softness on foreign powers like France were used against him by his political enemies for his entire career. He could never fully shake the caricature of his youth. A lesser known, but telling, detail about Fox's macaroni phase was his intense rivalry with another young politician, William Pitt the Younger. Their rivalry was not just political, but stylistic. Pitt was everything Fox was: not thin, austere, and famously indifferent to fashion and high living. Their personal styles became symbolic of their political ideologies. Fox's flamboyant, pleasure-seeking Whig-ism versus Pitt's sober, officially minded Toryism. The nation's political battles were mirrored in the wardrobes of its leaders. You have a brief conversation with Fox one evening. He has just won a modest amount back from the card table and is in high spirits. He compliments the unusual shade of your silk coat and makes a sharp, insightful joke about a recent political scandal. Talking to him is a dizzying experience. In one breath, he can offer a devastating critique of a government policy, and in the next, he can lament the declining quality of lace available from Brussels. Being in his presence gives you a strange sense of validation. He makes your lifestyle feel less like a frivolous dead end and more like a legitimate, if eccentric, path. He shows that the world of high fashion and the world of high politics are not mutually exclusive. In fact, there can be two sides of the same coin. But his presence is also a subtle rebuke. Fox is clearly going somewhere. His dandyism is a prelude to power. You look at your own life, a cycle of levees, promenades, and balls, and you feel a pang of anxiety. Is this all there is for you? Are you just the style, with none of the substance that Fox so clearly possesses? You watch him leave the club, his familiar, heavy-set figure wrapped in the most fashionable silk, disappearing into the London night on his way to another party, or perhaps to secretly study a bill for the next day's parliamentary session. He is a paradox, a walking contradiction, and he represents both the dazzling height of the macaroni phenomenon and the beginning of its inevitable absorption into the more serious world of politics and power. He is a reminder that while fashion is powerful, for men of his class, it is often just one of many tools used to shape a life of influence. The world outside your gilded cage of clubs, perks, and ballrooms is beginning to rumble. The whispers of political change that were once the subject of abstract debate in your coffee house are growing into a deafening roar. Two events, an ocean apart, will conspire to make your entire existence seem not just frivolous, but dangerously out of touch. The first is the war across the Atlantic, the American colonies, those rough-hewn, provincial settlements that your father's generation viewed as little more than a source of tobacco and raw materials, are in open revolt. The conflict, which began as a series of skirmishes, has escalated into a full-blown war for independence. At first, you and your friends treat the news from America as another topic for wagers and witty remarks. You bet on the outcome of battles. You critique the generals as if they were poorly performing actors, and you find the colonists' claims of no taxation without representation to be dreadfully earnest and unsophisticated. The whole affair seems very far away, a messy, provincial squabble that has little to do with your life in London. But as the war drags on, and as Britain suffers humiliating defeats at places like Saratoga, the mood in the capital begins to darken. The war is expensive, it is bloody, and it is challenging the very foundations of British imperial power. Suddenly, the sight of a young man in a pink silk coat and a towering wig, spending a fortune on gambling while the nation is at war, starts to look less like amusing eccentricity and more like treasonous indifference. The satirical prince, which once mocked you for being a joke, now mock you for being an unpatriotic one. They depict you primping in front of a mirror while in the background a map of the American colonies burns. The narrative hardens while real men are fighting and dying for the empire in the muddy fields of America. You, the Macaroni, are fiddling with your lace cuffs as Rome, or in this case, London burns. Then comes the second, more seismic shock, the French Revolution. This is not a distant colonial uprising, this is a cataclysm at the very heart of the world you so admired. The nation that gave you your fashion, your manners, and your entire aesthetic philosophy is devouring itself. The news that trickles back to London is horrifying. The Bastille has been stormed. The aristocracy is being hunted. The king and queen, the very epicenter of that glorious Rococo world you once glimpsed at Versailles, are imprisoned and eventually executed. The guillotine, a horrificously efficient instrument of death, becomes the symbol of a new and terrifying age. The French Revolution sends a shockwave of terror through the British aristocracy. This is their worst nightmare made real. It is a violent, definitive end to the world of powdered wigs, courtly manners, and aristocratic privilege. And suddenly, anything associated with that world, anything French, becomes toxic. Your entire persona is built on an admiration for, and imitation of, the French aristocracy. Now, that aristocracy is gone. Its members either executed or fleeing for their lives as destitute refugees. To dress in the French style is no longer just a fashion statement, it is a political statement of the most dangerous kind. It aligns you with a defunct, despised, and godless regime. Historians often mark the French Revolution as the final death knell for the Macaroni style and the flamboyant, aristocratic aesthetic represented. The political climate in Britain becomes intensely nationalistic and reactionary. Frenchness is no longer just a rival culture, it is a deadly, infectious disease. Patriotism demands that you look, act, and think like a true-born Englishman. A little-known but powerful symbol of this shift was the introduction of a tax on wig powder in 1795 by William Pitt's government, ostensibly a measure to raise funds for the war against France. It was also a direct, targeted attack on the aristocratic practice of powdering one's hair. It became patriotic to have unpowdered, natural hair. Many who had once powdered their hair out of fashion now abandoned the practice out of a sense of patriotic duty and to avoid the tax. The world is on fire, and you are standing in the center of the ballroom, holding a fan. The music has stopped, but you haven't realized it yet. The political ground has shifted so violently beneath your high-heeled feet that your entire way of life has been rendered obsolete, even grotesque. Your rebellion, which was about aesthetics and taste, is meaningless in an age of revolution and total war. The game has changed, and the frivolous, beautiful, and delicate world you fought so hard to create is about to be swept away by a tide of blood and history. In the harsh, unforgiving light of a world at war, a new aesthetic begins to take hold. One born not in the salons of Paris, but in the muddy fields and country estates of England. It is a style that speaks of patriotism, seriousness, and a new, more sober vision of masculinity. Your colorful, silken world is about to be washed away by a tide of dark wool. You begin to notice it first among the more politically astute members of your class, men who can read the changing winds. They start appearing at the club not in sky blue silk, but in simple, impeccably tailored coats of dark blue, black, or brown wool. The cut is different. Too, it's less about creating a delicate, artificial silhouette and more about emphasizing a natural, athletic form. The shoulders are broader, the chest is fuller, and the waist is less severely cinched. This is the birth of the modern man's suit. It is a style that projects sobriety, competence, and a distinct lack of frivolity. It is the uniform of a man who has serious business to attend to, running an estate, sitting in parliament, managing a global empire. It is, in every way, The anti-Macaroni statement. The details that once defined you are systematically stripped away. The extravagant lace at the cuffs is replaced by a simple, clean linen shirt cuff. The waistcoat, once a canvas for vibrant floral embroidery, becomes a plain, solid-colored garment. Your tight, silk breeches are gradually replaced by more practical trousers or sturdy, buff-colored riding breeches and tall leather boots, a look borrowed directly from the English country gentleman. It's as if your father's wardrobe has finally staged a successful invasion of your own. Even the wig, that towering monument to your former glory, is on its way out. Men begin to wear their own hair, cut shorter and styled in a natural fashion, often non-powdered, in a style that deliberately evokes the heroes of the Roman Republic and nod to democratic and republican ideals, a stark contrast to the monarchical excess of the old French regime. This profound shift in men's fashion is what historians refer to when they talk about the great male renunciation. Men abandoned their claim to be the more decorative and colorful sex, ceding that territory entirely to women. Fashion, for men, became about expressing one's social and professional standing through subtle cues, the quality of the cloth, the perfection of the cut, rather than through overt display of color and ornament. The goal was no longer to be beautiful, but to be respectable. The debate among historians is whether this change was driven more by the political climate, the reaction against France, or by the economic rise of a new, more business-oriented middle class whose sober values began to influence the aristocracy. The answer is likely that these two forces worked in tandem. The aristocracy adopted a more business-like and patriotic style of dress to differentiate themselves from the defunct French model and to align themselves, at least visually, with the rising tide of British commercial and industrial power. A small but telling detail in this transition is the changing nature of men's buttons. In your Macaroni heyday, buttons were often large, decorative, and made of precious materials. In this new era, buttons become smaller, more functional, and often made of simple brass or bone. They are there to do a job, not to be admired. This shift from ornament to function is a microcosm of the entire sartorial revolution. You feel the pressure to conform. To continue dressing in the Macaroni style is to mark yourself as a relic, a man hopelessly out of touch with the times. It's no longer a sign of rebellion, it's a sign of irrelevance. One by one, your friends start to adopt the new, more sober style. The flock of exotic birds that once gathered at White's is slowly being replaced by a flock of well-dressed crows. You hold up your favorite pink silk coat, the one that caused such a stir when you first wore it. The color, once so vibrant and daring, now seems garish and loud in this new, more serious world. The delicate floral embroidery looks fragile and naive. It is a costume from a play whose run has ended. With a sense of resignation that feels like a small death, you summon your tailor, the long-suffering Mr. Finch. But this time, you don't show him sketches from Paris. You ask him to make you a coat of dark blue superfine wool, cut in the latest, most understated English style. You are not just ordering a new suit, you are surrendering. You are trading in your colorful, rebellious past for a respectable, monochrome future. The age of the Macaroni is over. The age of the serious man has begun. As your own flamboyant style recedes into memory, a new figure emerges to take the throne of London's fashionable elite. He is your successor, but he is also your opposite. He is not the Macaroni, he is the dandy. And you watch his rise with a mixture of fascination and a strained, parental kind of disapproval. The most famous exemplar of this new style, the man who will become a legend, is George Beau Brummel. He is not a high-born aristocrat like you. His background is solidly upper middle class. His grandfather was a valet. He rises to the pinnacle of society not through birth or immense wealth, but through the sheer force of his personality and his obsessive, near-pathological attention to a new kind of style. Where your Macaroni aesthetic was about more color, more height, more ornament, the dandy's aesthetic is about less. It is a style of radical, minimalist perfection. Brummel's philosophy is that a man should be well-dressed, but not conspicuous. If people turn to stare at you on the street, you are not well dressed, but overdressed. This is a universe away from your own youthful creed, where the entire point was to make people stare. You observe Brummel and his acolytes at the club. A new generation of fashionable young men. Their uniform is the dark blue or black wool coat, the buff-colored waistcoat, and impeccably tailored trousers or breeches. There is no lace, no embroidery, no vibrant color. The entire effect relies on two things: the perfection of the cotton, the pristine cleanliness of the linen. Brummel is famous for his obsession with cleanliness. He reportedly spends hours a day on his toilet, a process that involves extensive bathing and scrubbing. His great innovation is the starched cravat, where you wore a stock or a relatively simple cravat. Brummel elevates the neckcloth to an art form. He uses vast squares of starched white linen, which he fastidiously wraps and ties around his neck in intricate knots, a process so demanding that his valet is said to bring him a pile of them each morning, and he will discard dozens before achieving the perfect, artfully crumpled effect. This is the new rebellion. It is a rebellion not of excess, but of perfectionism. It is a subtler, more disciplined form of dandyism. It requires just as much time and effort as your macaroni look, but the effort is directed towards achieving an air of effortless grace and understatement. Historians and cultural critics are endlessly fascinated by the transition from the macaroni to the dandy. Was the dandy a direct reaction against the macaroni, a conscious effort to create a more masculine and modern form of elegance, or was it an evolution, a refinement of the macaroni's core principle of a life dedicated to style, but adapted for a new, more industrial and democratic age? The consensus leans toward evolution. The dandy is still a man who elevates aesthetics above all else, but his aesthetic is one of sober, disciplined minimalism rather than rococo exuberance. A small, telling detail that separates you is the attitude towards perfume. You wore heavy, musk-based scents to announce your presence. Brummel's rule is that a gentleman should smell of nothing but fresh linen and country air. He achieves this through obsessive washing and by ensuring his clothes are always perfectly laundered. Any overt perfume is considered vulgar. Your sensory assault has been replaced by an almost clinical purity. You feel a sense of bewilderment watching these new dandies. They have taken the central idea of your youth that a man's appearance is a form of art and have twisted it into something you barely recognize. Their seriousness, their discipline, their obsession with tiny, almost invisible details. It feels joyless to you. Where was the fun? The color? The sheer, unapologetic silliness of it all? Your macaroni generation was the last great explosion of male ornamental dress in Western culture. You are the brilliant, final flash of color before the long, sober reign of the dark suit. The dandies who followed you perfected that suit, but they also cemented its dominance. You are now in your middle years. You are dressed in the respectable dark coat and white cravat that Brummel has made the uniform of the age. You see a group of young dandies critiquing the knot of a friend's cravat with the same intensity you once reserved for judging a new wig. You are, in a strange way, invisible to them. You are just another well-dressed gentleman. They have no idea that you were once a warrior in a war of style, that you wore colors that would blind them, and that your hair once touched the sky. You are a retired revolutionary, living quietly under the new regime, and the new king, though Brummel, has decreed that elegance is refusal. The years fall away like leaves. The 18th century, the stage for your glorious and absurd rebellion, is long gone. It is now the 1832nd, a new world of steam, iron, and industry. London is a bigger, louder, smokier city than the one you returned to from your grand tour. The fashions, politics, and manners of your youth seem like they belong to a different civilization entirely. You are an old man now. Your own hair is thin and white, a ghostly echo of the powdered mountain you once balanced on your head. Your movements are slow and deliberate, dictated by aching joints, not by the constraints of a tight silk coat. You dress in the sober, dark frock coats of the Victorian era, a style that has evolved from the dandyism of Beau Brummel, but has become even more rigid and uniform. You are a respectable elder, a man of property and standing. No one looking at you now could ever guess at the peacock you once were. Sometimes, you sit by the fire in your study, a heavy blanket over your knees, and you drift back in time. The memories come to you in vivid, sensory flashes. The scent of your wig powder, a mix of star-conned orange blossom. The feel of smooth, cool silk against your skin. The specific, vibrant shade of a pink coat, a color you haven't seen on a man in 40 years. The satisfying snap of a well-made fern. The ridiculous, delightful sway of the giant tassel on your miniature sword. You look around your study. It is a monument to Victorian sobriety, dark wood, heavy velvet curtains, shelves groaning with serious-looking books. There are no frivolous, pastel-colored porcelain figurines here. But in the bottom drawer of your desk, tucked away beneath old legal documents and property maps, you keep a small, locked box. Inside are the last surviving relics of your former self. There is a single, ridiculously large shoe buckle, its paste jewels now dull with age. There is a tattered remnant of lace from a cuff. And there's one of the satirical prints that once caused you so much embarrassment and secret pride. It's the one that shows you with a wig full of nesting birds. You look at the wild caricature, the absurdly skinny legs, the impossibly tiny waist, and you smile, a genuine, unforced smile. You remember the feeling, the thrill of walking into a room and knowing every eye was on you. The delicious, intoxicating power of being utterly, unapologetically different. You remember the camaraderie with your fellow Macaronis. That small band of brothers united by a shared love for the beautiful and the absurd. You remember the arguments with your father, the sense of fighting for something. Even if that something was just your right to be fabulous. Was it all just youthful folly, a meaningless phase of sartorial silliness sitting here now, in the twilight of your life? You know it was more than that. It was your one great, glorious act of self-creation. In a life that was otherwise mapped out for you from birth, the right school, the right marriage, the right career. Your Macaroni phase was the one time you seized control of the narrative. You chose to be a work of art in a world that demanded you be a pillar of the community. The historical verdict on your kind has been largely unkind. The term macaroni remains a synonym for foppish, effeminate, and ridiculous man. You are a footnote in the history books. A colorful but ultimately trivial episode before the serious business of the 19th century began. Historians, for the most part, sided with your father. They see you as a symptom of aristocratic decay, a last, decadent gasp before a more vigorous, middle-class morality took over. But they weren't there. They didn't feel the thrill of defiance, the joy of pure, unadulterated style. They see the caricature, not the courage it took to become that caricature. A young grandson comes into the room. He is a serious boy, dressed in a miniature version of the sober adult suit. He looks at the print in your hand. "Who's that funny man?" "Grandfather," he asks. You look from the wild, colorful figure in the print to the serious, monochrome little boy. "That," you say, your voice a soft, papery rustle, was a man who was not afraid of being laughed at. He was a man who believed that life was too short to be beige. The boy doesn't understand, of course. He just nods and goes back to his serious play. But you understand. In that drawer, in that box, you have preserved the evidence of your youth. It was a brief, dazzling, and utterly impractical period of your life. It was a performance that ended long ago. But, as you sit here, an old man in a dark suit, you know, with a certainty that warms your old bones, that it was the most real and alive you ever were. So, let's pull the lens back, away from the fireplace and the old man with his box of memories. Let's look for the ghost of you, the macaroni, in the world that came after. Where did all that energy, that flamboyant defiance, go? Did it simply vanish with the last puff of wig powder, or did it just go underground, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge? The legacy of the Macaroni is not a direct, unbroken line. You won't find it in the stark, respectable gentlemen of the Victorian era who followed immediately after you. But, if you look closely, you can see the faint, shimmering thread of your influence weaving its way through the next centuries of cultural rebellion. You were not an endpoint, you were a strange, glorious precedent. Your spirit first resurfaces in the aesthetes and decadence of the late 19th century. Think of Oscar Wilde, with his velvet coats, his lily and his lapel, and his belief that life should imitate art. When Wilde declared, one should either be a work of art, or wear a work of art, he was speaking a language you would have understood perfectly. He too used his appearance as a weapon against the drab, utilitarian values of his time. He too was caricatured, vilified, and ultimately punished for his refusal to conform to the rigid standards of masculinity. He was, in many ways, your spiritual grandchild. Then, jump forward to the 20th century. Look at the bright young things of the 1920s, with their extravagant parties, gender-bending costumes, and a desperate, glittering hedonism in the face of a traumatized, post-war world, their relentless pursuit of pleasure and sensation, their desire to shock their state elders. It's a familiar story, isn't it? And then, the echoes become louder. Look at the birth of rock and roll. Look at Little Richard in the 1950s, with his high pompadour hairstyle, his shimmering suits, his makeup, and his gloriously camped stage persona. He was a macaroni for the atomic age, using flamboyant style to challenge the sexual and racial norms of his time. The line becomes clearest with the glam rock artists of the 1970s. When you see David Bowie as Ziggy Stardust, with his towering red mullet, his skin-tight, otherworldly costumes, and his androgynous beauty, you are seeing a direct echo of the Macaroni. Bowie, like you, understood the power of the costume, the mask, the created persona. He took the idea of being a character to a whole new level, but the fundamental impulse to use fashion to create a new, more interesting, and more liberated identity was the same. The makeup, the high heels, the deliberate blurring of gender lines. It's all there. This is the central, enduring legacy of the Macaroni, a point that cultural historians are increasingly coming to recognize. You were pioneers in the use of fashion as a form of identity politics. You were one of the first Western subcultures to understand that what you wear can be a form of protest, a way of questioning and redefining what it means to be a man. You laid down a blueprint for future rebels. A small, specific legacy you left behind is the word dandy. While you were a macaroni, your refined, aesthetic-focused lifestyle paved the way for the dandies you followed. And the idea of the dandy, the man who dedicates his life to style, has haunted and fascinated Western culture ever since. So when you see a punk with a towering, brightly colored mohawk, remember your wig. When you see a goth in elaborate velvet and lace, remember your coat. When you see any group that uses clothing, makeup, and hair to create a community and to set themselves apart from the mainstream, you are seeing a new chapter in a book that you helped to write. You didn't win your war. The world did not become a Rococo paradise. In fact, mainstream men's fashion became even more sober and uniform after you. But you lost the battle in a truly spectacular fashion, and in doing so, you lit a torch. You proved that a man could be a work of art. You showed that there was more than one way to be strong, to be powerful, to be a man. Your legacy is not in the clothes that people wear today, but in the enduring idea that you don't have to accept the identity that society hands you. You can, if you are brave enough, invent your own. And that is a legacy far more powerful than any silk suit. The story is over now. The clatter of the carriage wheels on the cobblestones has faded. The last notes of the opera have long since died away, and the bright, defiant colors of the Macaroni have dissolved into the soft, deep gray of a dream. The world of towering wigs and tiny swords, of scented handkerchiefs and red-heeled shoes, now seems very, very far away. It floats gently on the quiet currents of your mind, a strange and beautiful ship from another time. You can feel the weight of your own comfortable blanket, a gentle anchor in the present moment. The soft hum of the fan, which was our time machine's engine, is now just a soothing, steady whisper, lulling you deeper into rest. The characters have all taken their bows, the disapproving father, the witty friend, the flamboyant rebel you became, and have all receded from the stage, leaving only a quiet, peaceful darkness. There are no more sharp opinions to be had, no more social battles to be fought. There is only the gentle, easy rhythm of your own breathing, in and out. A soft, slow tide, pulling you away from the shore of wakefulness and out into the calm, endless ocean of sleep. Let the last remnants of the story drift away like silk threads in the wind. Let the quietness envelop you. There is nothing left to do now but rest. The end of the article. Good night.